Hi friends, so I've been reading a book just lately. I've only just started it really. It's called The Management of Savagery by Max Blumenthal. It's really very interesting. It's sort of an easy read, which is good because sometimes Max Blumenthal, he has such a detailed knowledge about everything. Like when I say everything, he has great knowledge about US imperialism and Palestine and all of that. He's a really amazing journalist, and he tends to have so much knowledge, and it's sort of sometimes it's really kind of dense, sort of reading his stuff or listening to him. Yet he's incredibly knowledgeable and a great journalist, and puts across stuff that you don't normally hear because he has a way of finding out things. I really don't know what kind of sources he has, but he has some excellent sources. He always seems to find out stuff before a lot of other people do. He's an amazing independent journalist. Anyway, I wanted to read you just the inside flap, just to give you an idea of what this book is about. It says, in The Management of Savagery, Max Blumenthal excavates the real story behind America's dealings with the world and shows how the extremist forces that now threaten peace across the globe are the inevitable flowering of America's imperial designs. Washington's secret funding of the Mujahideen provoked the Russian invasion of Afghanistan in 1979. With guns and money, the United States has ever since sustained the extremists, including Osama bin Laden, who have become its enemies. The Pentagon has trained and armed jihadist elements in Afghanistan, Syria, and Libya. It has launched military interventions to change regimes in the Middle East. In doing so, it created fertile ground for the Islamic State and brought foreign conflicts home to American soil. These failed wars abroad have made the United States more vulnerable to both terrorism as well as native ultranationalism. The Trump presidency is the inevitable consequence of neoconservative imperialism in the post-Cold War age. Trump's dealings in the Middle East are likely only to exacerbate the situation. So anyway, that's the book, The Management of Savagery. Apparently there's a sort of American-associated Syria group that has been trying to stop Max from talking about this book. And they actually influenced a particular book chain or bookstore to not sort of sell this book. So that's really unfortunate, but in some ways it's not surprising. So that kind of is, I would say that's a bit of a badge of honor when people start trying to stop this book from being sold. Anyway, that's really all I wanted to bring your attention to. There's also a Media Roots radio episode that's out. They come out probably once a week, sometimes two will come out at once, but they try to get out 4 episodes every month. And Media Roots Radio is Abby Martin, the journalist, and her brother Robbie Martin. So check that out. It's really excellent analysis. And of course, check out the most recent Empire Files, which is called Giant. That's really excellent.
The new book Giants answers in great detail the commonly asked but little-known question: who really pulls the strings? Through exhaustive research, sociologist Peter Phillips outlines the top $17 trillion investment management firms, which control over $40 trillion in wealth, and exposes the few hundred people who decide the investment of global capital. Peter Phillips is a professor of political sociology at Sonoma State University and the former director of Project Censored. While in the Bay Area, I sat down with Peter to learn more about those who hold the reins of empire and capitalist hegemony. Let's get started by talking about the state of the world today as a result of our global economic system. Can you give us a quick assessment on the current state of human civilization?
Well, 80% of the people live on less than $10 a day. That's all the people in the world. So there's only 20% that we would call the middle class, so to speak. And then about 1% who are the transnational capitalist class. Those are the really, really rich people. So for the bottom 80%, $10 a day is not very much, and half of those Half the people in the world live on less than $2.50 a day. And the bottom third, over a billion, live on $1.25 a day. So that gross inequality is dramatic. In fact, we have 800 million people that are nutrition malnourished, and 30,000 of them die every day from starvation or malnutrition. So we have an ongoing slaughter of people who aren't, and there's more than enough food in the world to feed everybody. So, I mean, a third of the food in the world is wasted, but it's not profitable for capitalism to try to sell them that food, and it's not profitable to give it to them, so they won't do it. So they're just seen as surplus people, and they're allowed to die. So that I consider, a major humanitarian crisis in the world today. Deeply penetrating corporate media today, 80% of the stories that are coming from television news stories are packaged or prepared by public relation firms working for government or corporations. So 80%, I mean, that's a study that's been validated. We don't recognize the importance of how much news, corporate news, is managed in very deliberate ways to give us certain messages and not allow and not criticize capitalism in any way. Absolutely.
So this is my favorite part of your book, the protectors of the transnational capitalist class. Talk about who they are.
Protectors are NATO, the U.S. military, the police state, and private military. G4S is the second largest private employer in the world with 625,000 people. The only one bigger is Walmart. So G4S were the people with the dogs up in the Dakotas that were attacking the demonstrators around the pipeline. They do everything from mercenary activities, war-type activities in Africa, South America, to protecting the Israeli settlements from the Palestinians. They do it all. They guard banks, they run prisons. I mean, they're a massive, private security company. If a company wants to have a green zone, a protection zone in the middle of anywhere, they'll do it for them, and they kill people. So, and then of course Blackwater, which is now Academy, is the other big private military group, and Eric Prince is trying to convince Trump to let him take over the war in Afghanistan. And they have their own private air force in Africa. Private security is rapidly growing. International, the U.S. military and NATO in particular is all over the world now. And with bases, over 1,000 bases, some of these are lily pad bases in every country in Africa that they can go to immediately. They don't necessarily have troops there, but they build them ahead of time. And occupied, we've got troops in 140 countries, literally killing people, training people, killing people. It's to protect capital. It's not to protect you and me. It's to protect capital and have capital penetration in all regions of the world. And if there's any interference and they want to try to do a regime change with governments, and debt collection. So if a country is in debt and the military is there to really threaten the government if they're not going to return.
And of course, their upcoming documentary called, it's about Gaza and the human rights situation in Gaza. They're getting sort of suppression of that trailer even from YouTube. And that's not surprising because YouTube, I mean, anytime I mention Gaza or Palestine in the tags in the bottom, I notice that there's a sort of great diminished viewing. Not that I get a lot of views anyway, but I notice that there's a drop. And also they tend to put age restrictions on things like that. If I ever show any, like people having their homes demolished, which happens in Palestine regularly, those sort of things are sort of suppressed with algorithms, and age restriction is put on them. Recently, I showed part of the WikiLeaks released the WikiLeaks released Collateral Murder, which was provided by Chelsea Manning, and which has, gotten Julian Assange into probably what they say is the most trouble, but I'd say it's everything that WikiLeaks puts out. But I noticed that they always, anytime I've added, there's twice now I've added that parts of that sort of released Collateral Murder video, YouTube actually clamps down on it and puts an age restriction on it. And that's interesting because I've checked out YouTube and I've checked out a lot of there's a lot of channels, often pro, military, or American military channels, and they often show people being gunned down from AC-130s or helicopters, and people being blown up, etc. And they never have any age restrictions on their videos. But something like Collateral Murder, which is leaked by WikiLeaks, that's a different story. Of course, they sort of say, well, these are terrorists that we are gunning down in these American military videos, but who knows who they are? And one person's, the American calling people terrorists doesn't mean anything much anymore, since anybody who is fighting against an occupation, what would you call them? Some people in that country would probably call them freedom fighters. I'm not saying that everybody who is sort of pushing against the U.S. is in the Middle East is a freedom fighter, but there's sort of ISIS can be just some people in ISIS can just be sort of sadistic and just filled with hate. Of course, there's context there too, but I mean, the thing is that these American military sites, when they're gunning down and blowing up people, apparently it's okay for YouTube that they do that they show things like that. But I'm not allowed to show Collateral Murder. So that says a lot about YouTube. The censorship, is kind of, it's really sort of awful. And I noticed that, if I mention Assange in a title, I think that is suppressed as well, or has been suppressed. Maybe not initially, but now that I think they put some algorithms in there that anybody that's talking about Assange is probably going to have their videos suppressed in a sort of a shadow ban type thing. And it was, Avi Martin was saying, it's a good idea for people, if they do have sites on these social media sites that are suppressing and censoring things, to make sure that you have some other sort of a way of displaying these videos, so that and making sure that you have them in a hard copy, because at any time YouTube could just kind of decide to shut down a whole bunch of channels and a whole bunch of videos, because the national security state, look what they're doing to Assange, look what they're doing look what they're doing to any pushback against war, any pushback against anti-war stuff. So anyway, that's something to keep in mind. So anyway, that's really, I just wanted to bring your attention to that book. I don't know about you, but I tend to buy different books, and I sort of intend to read them, and then things happen and I don't get around to it. And I've got a bunch of books by different people that I have to get through, and I hope to get through it at some point. But it's funny how you can have books sitting on your shelf, and that's what books are not really there to look pretty. They're there to actually read. But anyway, I'll get to them. Anyhow, I hope that this finds you well, and thank you so much for watching. If you've liked the content prior to this, please hit the like button. Please subscribe and click the notifications bell. Otherwise, you don't receive updates. And please leave comments. I enjoy comments. And thanks so much for watching. Till next time. Bye for now.